Hey y'all, it's Mary Hyatt, and I'm so excited you're here for this month's topic, which is all about necessary endings. It's October, y'all, and as the old saying goes, the trees are about to show us how lovely it is to let dead things go. This month, we're going to be able to explore how to release the things, people, habits, and behaviors that are no longer serving us, and to ultimately stop watering our dead plants. All right, y'all, it is going to be good, so let's get into it.
Welcome to the Living Fully Alive podcast with Mary Hyatt, here to help you find your authentic voice, learn how to love yourself, and embrace your life. And now, your host, life and mindset coach, body love advocate, and doTERRA Presidential Diamond, Mary Hyatt.
Hey everybody, it is Mary, and welcome to the final episode in this month's theme of necessary endings. Man, we have had a great month, haven't we? I have just loved the episodes. I feel like the feedback that I'm getting from you guys has been so positive. I think just the fact that we're in this season of a lot of visual letting go of all the trees changing and the leaves falling and kind of entering into a whole new season, ending out this month with a time change. It's like, okay, this is so perfect to mirror what's happening in our external world, to kind of look at how we can even further reflect that in our internal world. And just kind of a recap of the last 3 episodes, because this is the 4th and final episode. And y'all know this is kind of the episode where I wrap up before we go into next month's theme and topic. But man, the first episode, The Beauty of Letting Go, I talked kind of about this idea of seasons, how really everything in our lives has a season. There are phases in our lives where things begin, things end, we grow up, we change. And so I just love talking about that whole concept of what can be the gift of releasing and letting go and moving into a compelling future for your life. So that's the first episode. And then the second episode, I brought on my boyfriend, Bentley Caldwell, for a candid conversation around the topic. And we got into talking about letting go of outdated and old identity. So the episode is called Walking Away from the Old You. And y'all, there were some mic drop moments from a man. He was so great. He really shared his wisdom kind of throughout his journey of changing careers and walking away from a successful music career, and what it looks like for everybody to kind of have to update our identities as we shift and change and move into these new kind of careers, new seasons of our lives. So I love that episode. It was a very beautiful, candid conversation. So go check out that episode. And then last week, I brought on our special guest, our guest expert of the month, which was Juan Santos, who is a therapist. And we had a whole conversation about what it looks like to let go inside of relationships. And that was a powerful episode, because whether you're single, you have been in a new relationship, you're in a long-term committed relationship, or you're pondering leaving your current relationship, this is an episode for you. So we talk about what it looks like to reinvent yourself inside of your relationship, creating space for your partner to grow and change, and how you can kind of like move through that gracefully. So this is all teeing us up for today's episode, where we're going to be talking about this idea of pruning. And when I've been thinking about, okay, what do I want to talk about for the last episode, because we've kind of like hit a lot of different areas, I wanted to make sure that I really talked about not only sort of these times in our lives where we are forced to let go. Like, I know for me, I have had my fair share of letting goes. Like, y'all know, my divorce, that was such a big one. That was sort of like, man, this is something that I am having to let go. There was such a death there. And then having to walk through the cancer of my baby nephew, and I was a caretaker of him for 2 years before he passed away. Like, that was early on in my marriage, early on in my years. I think I was 20 years old, and that was just very traumatic. And that was a letting go. All kinds of deaths, like literal and figurative. And so much of what we have to release and let go of is not by our choosing. things that happen to us. Either we get fired, somebody we know, then we love passes away. So much of this year, as we know, has just been uncontrollable, and things that circumstantially are just happening, and we're having to adjust and react and choose to release the attachment, choose to let go, have to find something new. And that kind of letting go is like, maybe if we think about categories, that's in one category, but there's a different kind that I want to talk about today, which is this concept of pruning. And you got to love Instagram for this, because I was scrolling through my Instagram and I saw somebody post this quote by Florence Littauer. I hope I'm saying that right. I don't even know who this person is, but this stopped me in my tracks, stopped me in my scrolling. And I was like, oh my God, this is so perfect. And the quote said, "The purpose of the pruning is to improve the quality of the roses, not to hurt the bush." Y'all, how freaking good is that? Okay, I'm going to read it again. "The purpose of the pruning is to improve the quality of the roses, not to hurt the bush." So pruning is like something totally different. Like, it's something that we consciously choose. It's me choosing to see what parts of my life are stale or stagnant or unhealthy, poisoned, toxic, withering, distracting, like parts of my life that feel just habitual. Like, I've always done it. This is the thing that I've always done. I've always done it this way. But is that really serving me? Is that really giving me what I want? Is that walking me towards where I want my life to be? Old ways of thinking. Old rules that I had for my life that are outdated, that I don't want to be rules anymore. It's kind of looking at my life and going, wait a second, what is holding me back from my roses, metaphorically, like blooming and prospering and becoming strong? What is going on here in my life, in my thinking, in my behaviors, in my relationships, and who I surround myself with, and what I've like tolerated and what I've agreed to, that isn't helping me be my best and highest self? So the idea of pruning is like deciding to cut those off, to create like healthier mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, like my life, healthier self, healthier body, healthier mind, healthier spirit, and choosing and deciding to let them go. Like, this is where we get back into the driver's seat of our life and really can show up as our best advocate, like being fiercely on our own side to say, wait a second, like nobody is going to come in and look at my life and say, man, Mary, like these things, if you could just like move from them, move away from them, let them go, release them, change them, update them, your life would like skyrocket. Your life would be unbelievably joyful, fulfilling, successful, abundant. But if you could just do these things, or God coming in and just like removing them for us. That's not always how it works. I mean, I don't know that, I love my coach. I have a beautiful relationship with listening and hearing feedback. But the reality is that if we are going to be fully alive, women who are taking a stand for our most authentic selves, living in alignment with our soul's purpose, then we're going to have to kind of do this work to prune our own bushes, to go in and self-diagnose and look at what is not serving me anymore. What really is something that is unconscious or out of rebellion or out of parts of myself that are from trauma or hurt that I've been doing and kind of like hanging out with them way too long, that is keeping me from my life, that is keeping me from the most fulfilling life that I could have. And so this is why I love this idea of pruning. And it was so cool because I actually had been recommending this book called Necessary Endings by Dr. Henry Cloud. I've mentioned him before. He wrote the book Boundaries. And I talked about him in the first episode, and I've just gained a lot of wisdom from that book. I highly recommend grabbing a copy. And he has a whole part about pruning in his book. And I was like, well, let me just hand it over to the expert and let him say this better than I ever could. So I'm going to read a little bit from him because it's so powerful. He says, there's a method behind beautiful gardens called pruning. Pruning is a process of proactive endings. A rose bush cannot reach its full beauty potential without pruning. The gardener intentionally and purposefully, get that y'all, intentionally and purposefully cuts off branches and buds that fall into any of these three categories. Number one, healthy buds and branches that are not the best. So let me just think about this for a second, y'all. Pruning healthy buds and branches that are not the best. I just feel like that is so incredibly powerful. If you think about things that are just okay, like if we had a scale from good, better, best, if we want to live our lives in that best category, and by the way, that does not mean perfection. Let's just get really clear on that, because that's not attainable and it's not a great expectation to have on yourself. But like the best, like the most fulfilling, the most rewarding, the most ROI, like give back to yourself. Sometimes there are things in our lives that we've been settling for and we've just allowed them to be good and not the best. And like, I remember this so vividly of just talking to a client of mine, asking her how she was doing. And she was like, I'm okay. I'm fine. And I was like, oh, well, okay. What would it be like to be great? Like, what if you could answer that question and say, like, I'm doing great, not just surviving, not just getting through, but just okay. But what if you could be great? And it's like, it's great to be fine. It's great to be okay. I mean, that's kind of like neutral. That would kind of go in the category of good, but it's not the best. And maybe it's healthy. Maybe you have kind of gotten to that point where you're not in trauma anymore. You're not in this place of getting just day by day. Maybe you're not in place of feeling super overwhelmed or anxious or stressed, but it's just sort of like you're going through the motions. I've heard a lot of people talk about just being Groundhog's Day. So that's sort of like the good category. So when we prune, we've got to look at those healthy buds and branches that are okay, that are fine, but they're not the best, because that takes up space. That takes up room. It doesn't allow us to have the best roses. Okay, number two, second category of areas that we're going to prune. Sick branches that are not going to get well. I just want that to like drop and settle for a second. Sick branches that are not going to get well. How many things in your life are you holding on to that cannot be resuscitated? That are sick, that are not going to get well, that don't want to get well. Like, how many of you guys have been near people who are very content in their own misery? Like, they don't have any desire to change, to learn, to grow. Like they're festering. They're festering in their wounds and they don't want you to rescue them. And it's like, stop rescuing. Stop trying to rescue people who don't want to be rescued. Stop meeting people and giving to people who are not going to reciprocate. Where are those sick branches that are not going to get well? And this could be processes in your business. This could be outdated ways of thinking, limiting beliefs, these kind of like old sick ways of like that just aren't your highest good. You're like, ugh, this is not going to help me get where I want to go. So that's the second category. The third, Henry Cloud says, are dead branches that are taking up space needed for the healthy ones to thrive. Dead branches. And y'all, we all have the dead branches in our lives. And so growth depends on getting rid of the unwanted. Henry Cloud goes on to say, in order for the bush to thrive, a few have to go and end their role to the life of the bush. Without pruning, you don't get the best roses. Without pruning, the bush is just average and far less than what they prove to be. Like rose bushes, your life also needs the same three types of pruning to be all that you desire. Good cannot begin until bad ends. Good cannot begin until bad ends. So let that sink in for just a second and maybe begin to kind of think like, oh yeah, these are some of my areas of my life that I'm probably going to have to prune. And the reality is that pruning is something that if we're committed to growth, if we are committed to kind of getting rid of all the things that are holding us back, like all the ways that we're limiting ourselves, all the just crappy stories we've bought into over our lifetime, moving forward in like advocacy for ourselves and, really standing and making a stand in the ground for our best and highest life. Like pruning is honestly a natural part. Like I can think back of so many times where I've had to prune. A lot of times that's been relationships, which is just freaking hard, like so hard. Like if I look around, I'm the average of the 5 closest people to me. I'm the average of the 5 closest people to me. Whoa, wait a second. This is not going to serve me moving forward. And it's not like a callous kind of recognition. It's more like the reality of sort of the sick branches that don't want to get well. It's like, I can't carry 5 people on my back and expect to continue on my own journey. Like maybe one person, obviously like there are seasons in people's lives that are just hard, and just walking through that with people is beautiful and such a gift. And I love doing that for my friends. But when it gets to the point of being toxic, and y'all all know when it gets to that point where you're like, this is bringing me down, and not like selfishly, it's like, no. This is like robbing me of my light. This is keeping me from my purpose. This is continually reiterating the only option is to play small. And when that's going on, and I've had to do this, literally every few years, it sort of just either kind of naturally happens, or I have to really choose it. In the idea here of pruning, even the way that I think, it's like, wow, I've been thinking this one way for so long, and the truth is that thinking isn't going to get me to the next season and stage of my life. It won't. It got me here, but it's still limited. It's still based out of this need in some way of trying to get love, get approval, be significant, play by the rules, make sure that I'm loved and needed and valued. And so it's like, I'm consistently having to look at that and prune out those unconscious beliefs, those unconscious perspectives, those unconscious ways of thinking that aren't serving me. The truth is, I honestly do this every single day when I journal. Like, I go through in the morning and I'm looking at, okay, what thoughts are not going to serve me in having a day that I get everything that I need to get done? Because I might wake up and I might feel stressed. I might be like, oh my gosh, like there's not enough time to get everything done. There's no way this is going to work out. I can go through a laundry list of sort of waking up in time famine and panic and overwhelm and stress. And if I don't take a couple minutes in the morning to prune those thoughts and say, nope, we're not doing that. We are not doing that. That is a recipe for a really stressful day, a really anxious day. And I have choice over the matter on what I'm thinking. I can go in and prune my thoughts and create space and reiterate and really foster and nurture and nourish the thoughts that are going to be life-giving for me today. I have all the time in the world to get exactly what I need to get done. I'm fully supported. I'm fully resourceful. I'm fully capable. There are so many thoughts that we can choose. And so for me, part of this whole pruning process is going through the pruning of our thoughts. But I want to share with you my 5 steps to the pruning process. Hey y'all, I'm sure you've been hearing me mention my Fully Alive Circle membership, and you might be wondering what it is and how you can join. So let me tell you a little bit about it. So the Circle membership is a safe place for women to gather together in a heart-centered community to take this deep dive into personal transformation. So it's my online membership where you'll learn how to find yourself again through daily devotional practices. Inside of our private Facebook group, I share resources like guided meditations, yoga practices, essential oil recipes, journal prompts, and so much more that dive into our monthly topic that we explore right here on the Living Fully Alive podcast. And all those resources are delivered to your inbox weekly to help you create powerful change in your life. So if you're looking for an affordable way to continue your journey of living fully alive, then definitely check out the Fully Alive Circle membership. Just go to maryhyatt.com/circle and you can find out all the details and join. All right, now back to this week's episode, because I want to take you through this step by step so that you kind of have an idea, no matter what it is. Again, whether it is something that is a thought, a behavior, a relationship, a judgment towards yourself and to your body, shame you've been carrying, lack of forgiveness that you've been holding on to, resentment that you've been holding on to, fear that you've been kind of harboring inside of yourself, staying in relationships too long, staying in relationships with coworkers, with a business, with a partner, with friends. Whatever it is, there's kind of like a way you can go through this that is step by step. And obviously, as we know, it's messy through the process, obviously, but I think this will give you at least a great kind of framework that you can take into going to consciously prune areas of your life that need pruning. So the first step is to visualize your future. To visualize where you're headed, your ideal future. Like if you think about you and your life, if you think about yourself at your best, your highest self, your most successful, your most fulfilled, your healthiest you in all areas, your body, your mind, your business, your healthiest self in life, what does that future look like? We've got to know where we are wanting to go and what it is that you're wanting to create. That's so important. We have to start here. And so having a desire for growth, having this destination in mind is going to help you even understand and gain clarity of what will need to be pruned. Because right now in your life, it's sort of like, it's all sort of, and I'm using quote fingers, like working. It's not, but it is because it's what you do every day. So if you're going to shift and go, okay, what is it that I'm going to need to prune? I've got to like make space to visualize and flesh out where I'm going and getting like super specific on the more that you're craving in your life. I mean, literally every single person that comes to me in my coaching practice, my one-on-one clients, those that are in the Fully Live Circle membership, they are all desiring something more out of their lives. Something more. And it may not all be the same thing, but there's something that they are not getting currently from their life. And they go, I don't want to keep doing this day to day. I want something else. I want something more. But we've got to get really clear on what that is and get radically honest with that. It's just so beautiful to get to that place where we can go, this is what I want. This is what I want. This is the life that, like, if I could design it and create it, which you can, this is what I would choose. These are the things that are important to me. These are the things that I value. And really write this out. Like, take a pen to paper and journal it out. Write it out as a visualized future. So that's the first step. We've got to sort of go into our future ahead of time and visualize where we're headed. The second step to the pruning process is to get radically honest. And this is the truth serum moment, or as we say in the South, the come to Jesus moment. Y'all, don't you just love the South? Like, what the heck? You got to come to Jesus moment. I mean, that's when you're literally going, I am willing to look at what is my life versus where I want my life to be. Where we can really take a moment with radical honesty and notice where we feel stuck in our lives, what's holding us back. And one of the things that I really want to bring to my clients, and I'll share this with you guys, is when we have this radical honesty, it's really brave and it's very vulnerable to kind of admit that, like, we're not where we want to be. So I encourage you, as you do this process, to really bring a lot of like compassion and understanding and tenderness without judgment. This is bringing new awareness into something that was unconscious before, and getting to that point where you kind of get out of denial and identify what those psychological or physical roadblocks are, what's in the way. Like, we need to meet that with like, kudos, girl, way to go. That you can admit this, that you can be here and share kind of like, okay, I'm willing to see this. I'm willing to look at this in myself, whether that is our thinking or a habit or a person. Some of these things aren't going to be able to come with you to get to that destination, to your future life, to your future self. So really admit and recognize that doing what you've always been doing isn't going to get you where you want to go. That there are some things in your life that aren't going to be able to follow you there. And that really, we have to change in order to get unstuck. And honestly, this process is at the beginning is like, to me, takes a lot of courage, but it actually feels quite freeing to know that there is better ahead, that there is another way. Like, think about who you would be without this thing in your life that's holding you back. I was just working with a one-on-one client this week, and she identified a core fear that she had. And I asked her, I said, what would your life be like if this fear didn't dominate everything that you did? What would it be like if this fear wasn't having a vote on every decision that you made in your business? What would your life be like if you were literally free from being imprisoned by this fear? All of a sudden, it was like, whoa, her life began to become pretty freaking amazing as she started to visualize it. And that's the pruning process. We've got to go, okay, let me get honest that this fear is running the show and I've allowed it to just run wild, that I haven't supervised it, that I've just let it go crazy. And in order for her to get where she wanted to get in her business, she's going to have to prune out mentally, neurologically, that fear. There's no way for her to get to her future holding on to that fear. It will always keep her stuck. It will always get in the way of her best and highest self in business and in life. So we got to get radically honest. That's the second step. The third step to the pruning process is to control your mindset. Y'all, I don't remember where I heard this, but somebody somewhere once told me that our brains, our unsupervised mind, is like a 2-year-old with a machete. It is just going wild, hacking through everything. I mean, it is going to go back to old limiting beliefs if you let it, because of the ways our brain works, and that it goes to the easiest pathway that we've created neurologically. It's going to go to our habitual way of thinking. And if we have lived in a life of self-doubt, of anxiety, of fear, and thinking that we can't do it, that we're not enough, that there's no way we could be successful, our brain is going to kind of cut us off at the knees before we even begin. So you have got to interpret this idea of pruning from a place of empowerment and not from shame or guilt. Because I know there's going to be people that are listening that are feeling like, oh my gosh, I have held on too long to this thing. Here I am again. I failed. Something must be broken, that I haven't pruned enough, and here I am. It's all my fault. That can happen. And this is that mindset piece. So how you define this pruning process, the meaning that you give it, is crucial to the execution of it. So your brain is going to have a lot of options to choose from on how to interpret the pruning. Now, you could see yourself, and these are all optional thoughts, and oftentimes these are default thoughts because of those very well-worn paths inside of our brains. So you could see yourself, let's say you have to, or you feel like part of the pruning, part of this necessary ending, is to walk away from a friendship that isn't healthy anymore, that's either abusive or really, really gets you down. The person again is sort of sick and not willing to go seek healing. And I mean that metaphorically. And so all of a sudden you're starting to envision this pruning and you go, oh my God, I'm going to be so mean. How dare I? I'm so cutthroat. It's so insensitive. You might feel like the worst person in the world to walk away from somebody who's hurting or who's in need or whatever. Okay, so these are what I like to remind you that are just thoughts, that are just sentences in your head. It doesn't make them true. It's just your brain's way of choosing how to interpret a situation. So you might even have the thought that it's too late, that it's not even worth it to prune. You might have the thought that it's going to be too hard. It's going to be too uncomfortable. You might think that it's going to cost you too much. You might think that you don't know how to do it once you've kind of identified what you want to prove. You don't know what to do it, or you don't know what's on the other side. And so you don't know what to do once you've pruned this out of your life. What's your life going to be like, So you might not know how to have difficult conversations or to stop an addictive behavior, but you can interpret this pruning in a way that is empowering and life-giving. And honestly, just normalizing the fact that this is going to be part of your new normal, this idea of pruning, that you're going to have to do this regularly. And it's just part of how you see the world now, part of your kind of responsibility for your life and creating it the way that you want it to be. is going to include pruning. So it might be awkward at first. It might be hard at first. You might stumble through it at first, but you are going to get better at this. And it's going to be easier to sort of navigate. So if you can really work on controlling your mindset around pruning, notice the thoughts that come up that are wanting to keep you in those old habits and those old behaviors and the old way of thinking and those old fears and that old anxiety. Notice when your brain wants to make sentences in your head and thoughts that you're thinking and beliefs that you've believed for a long time, fact versus interpretation, fact versus like just an opinion. Most of everything that goes through your brain is going to feel true and it's going to feel like fact, but it's just an opinion. So here's some questions. Like, how can I see this as something that's going to be giving me more life? How can I remind myself I am fully resourceful and capable to do this pruning? What would I need to think to remind myself that I am fully supported? What would I need to be thinking to remind myself that I'm choosing this for my highest good? This isn't a should. Like, I am choosing this. Because when things are a should, like, well, I should get rid of this. I should let this go. This should be a necessary ending. Adults rebel against their shoulds. But when you're like, no, I'm choosing this for my highest good, that's a way more powerful thought than I should do this. So what would I need to think to remind myself that this is creating space for a life I truly desire? Like, really choosing to see this as something that you want, something that you're choosing, and something that is possible. So we've got to control our mindset. The fourth step is to commit to the pruning. So this is where you have to get clear on the actual steps it's going to take for you to prune. So having the awareness of, okay, here's where I'm going. Here's where my desired future lies. Here's sort of the gap. Here's where I'm not quite there yet. Here are the things. I'm getting radically honest about what needs to be released out of my life in order to get there. And I'm going to control my mindset around that. So I set myself up mentally for success. Now I've got to commit. Like, I have got to figure out, what are the tangible steps? What does this pruning actually look like for myself? So I would literally write these out in a numbered list in my journal. Like, okay, step 1, I need to stop hanging out with my friend every single night. I'm just using that as an example. Like, I can't keep hanging out with the same friend who I need to step away from in order to live my best life. I can't keep hanging out with them every night and expect for it to happen naturally. Like, I'm going to have to slowly back up from that relationship. And what does that look like? Tangibly. Just those little ways of being able to slowly do this. And I said this on an Instagram story the other day, but this process of pruning isn't always just a one and done. Like, sometimes we got to cut the branch down a few times before it's actually stops growing back. So be patient in that. But as you're writing this down, get clear on why this has to happen now. Like, find that internal motivation of urgency, because the truth is, typically whatever it is that we're choosing to release and walk away from and letting go is going to be hard. And it might be mildly hard, like kind of giving up the thought habits that we have. Like, for example, waking up every morning and feeling like we don't have enough time. Like, that's not going to be a useful thought moving into your future. If you're creating something and you're creating a new life and creating a new business, like, you're gonna have to prune out that thought. So that's not that challenging, but you might have to do some journaling around it, choosing some new thoughts that are more empowering. Like, remind yourself every morning that that's not true. It's just a sentence in your head, and choosing a new thought instead. But sometimes they're really freaking hard. Like, sometimes this pruning sucks big time, like leaving a relationship. Like, I know that for me, when I chose to get divorced, and that was a choice, that was a pruning that had to happen in order for me to get to the future that I knew I was meant for. Even when I knew that it was right, hardest freaking thing I've ever done in my life. Like, so freaking hard. So walking into our futures, taking a stand, is one of the bravest things that you're ever going to do. And some of those brave choices are little and accumulated over time, make massive shifts and change in your life. And sometimes they really are really big. And the reality is chances are you've probably done a really good job at avoiding this discomfort already, which is why you're at where you're at, like the unwillingness to sit in the discomfort of having to prune. Like if you think about cutting, like taking a pair of shears and cutting, like even again, those healthy, good roses, but not the best roses, y'all, like it's still going to create discomfort. So it's really helpful to enlist some support and accountability for the pruning. Regular check-ins with people, like a support group is great. I've done that in my past so many times. Therapist, coach, friend. It's really important to have people that can help you kind of stay accountable. And remember that part of this commitment is like, you got to get clear on the cost if we don't change. If you don't change and let this thing go. Like if you don't do this, what is it going to cost you? In my Fully Life Circle membership, I offer 5 days of journal prompts every month for the topic. And so I'm going to read out a couple of these rapid fire questions that I gave my members. And you can think about answering these as well when you think about what is it costing me if I don't create this necessary ending for myself, if I don't prune this thing. So list out whatever it is that you're releasing. Like, what will it cost me if I don't let it go? If I don't let it go, I know that I will always be, and then fill in the blank. And really like make this feel emotional. Like I'm so tired of feeling XYZ, stuck, exhausted, burnout, lack of energy, whatever it is. Like really identify the pain by staying where you're at and not pruning. What will it rob you from? I love this question. The lie I tell myself about this is, again, our brains want to keep doing what they've always done because it's the easiest road. So we have to tell ourselves a lot of lies. It's going to be too hard. It's going to be too difficult. I'll never be able to do it. Like, what's the lie that you've been telling yourself about this pruning? Okay, another question to identify with what this is costing you. I'm so sick of missing out on fill in the blank because of this. What are you missing out on by holding on to this thing too long? This thought, this feeling, this behavior, this addictive pattern, this codependency, this resentment, this anger, this fear, this anxiety, this depression, this relationship, this job. And the truth is, when I let go, blank will happen. The truth is, when I let go, blank will happen. Kind of going back and like revisiting that future. So create some deadlines for yourself. Set up some checks and balances and really ask yourself what you need to set up so that you really do follow through with this pruning. Commit deeply emotionally and also tangibly, realistically to this pruning. And then lastly, this might be my favorite. Make space for grief. The reality is that grief is inevitable. You are literally letting something go. And that was the truth for me. Like when I chose my divorce, knowing it was the right thing, I still had to grieve the life that I thought that I was going to live. Like I never in a million years thought I would be divorced ever. Ever, ever, ever. No one in my family is divorced. I'm the first one, like every generation, first one. Never even was an option in my brain. So when I thought about my future, it included a whole life that I was having to say goodbye to or choosing to say goodbye to. It was heartbreaking. I mean, there was like legit grief for years. And honestly, there's still grief now, even though I'm in a beautiful, healthy, loving relationship that I'm so grateful to be in and have really designed and created a life. Like there's still moments of grief. But in that moment, I had to be present for that grief big time. And grief is so powerful because it allows us to acknowledge the loss without pretending that we aren't leaving something behind. But it also, like, it really acknowledges the ending, the completion, and that's important. So it doesn't just sort of like hang in no man's land, like purgatory, like sort of in this weird in between. It's like, no. It's done. Like we have put the stake in the ground. We've drawn the line in the sand. Like we have let go. We have literally cut that branch and pruned. And so it's complete. It's over. It's finished. And we are moving beyond what was, what is. So grief really does give us the opportunity to move forward by really being present for that space of transition, kind of that space that happens between what we've always done to where we're headed. It's really healing. I want to revisit Henry Cloud again because he says it, honestly, he says it the best. He says, grief has movement to it. It goes somewhere. It goes forward. Feeling the anger helps get the protest out of the way. And feeling the sadness helps move the letting go further along. It helps get people unstuck. When people do not feel their feelings, positive and negative, about something significant that has ended, they will remain tethered to it in some way. That is why feelings involved in grief are unique. Unlike emotions that do not take us anywhere and in fact can keep us stuck, you are saying, I am looking the reality right in the face and dealing with it. The reality that this, whatever this is over, finished. Grief also means I am getting ready for what is next because I am finishing what is over. Isn't that powerful? I am getting ready for what is next because I am finishing what is over. And that requires grief. And y'all, grief takes time. It requires presence, attention, tenderness, allowing ourselves to feel sad or confused or angry, and just recognizing that this is a natural process of the pruning journey. Like, it is hard, but it's productive. So we've got to make space for grief. So there you have it. 5 steps: visualizing your future, getting radically honest, controlling your mindset, committing to the pruning, and making space for grief. Y'all, this is your choosing. You are going to get to do this pruning. It's so, to me, so empowering. You're in the driver's seat. This is where you take a stand for your life and you choose life. You choose not to be a victim anymore, but actively and intentionally claim the life that you've always hoped for and wished you'd had. And the truth is that in order for anything to grow and prosper, we have to let go of what is robbing us of the energy and the life force that we could be spending on creating that life. It is time. It is time. So what do you need to prune? What do you need to prune? I encourage you to journal this out, write it out, go through this process, sort of like self-diagnose, figure this out so that you can move forward into your best life. I mean, that is like, it's like that, like the work that matters, the work that counts. Like, yes, this is going to be hard. Yes, this is going to require me to show up for my life in a way that I never have before. But like, I am moving myself towards that life by doing this. That's the gift of pruning. It is so, so, so worth it because then we get the best roses. We don't even settle for good. We get the best roses. Like, oh, I love that. I love that so much. So y'all, that completes our necessary endings theme for this month. And I am super pumped about next month because we are moving into talking about body movement. One of my very favorite things to talk about. And I'm not talking about rigid exercise. I'm not talking about shame and getting your ass off the couch and, running a 5K. No. I'm talking about like learning how to get back into our bodies as a relationship for healing, making peace inside of our bodies with movement, what it means to be truly embodied, and how to be a human that moves and kind of can get out of that restrictive diet mentality way of moving and really move from a place of freedom and loving on ourselves. And so we're going to have a whole month dedicated to this, which is going to be beautiful and profound. And I cannot wait to jump into that next week with you guys. So share this episode with somebody who you know that it will be super powerful for, and then join us next month for body movement. All right, y'all, I hope you have a fabulous rest of your week. And just to remember that the purpose of life is to be grateful, to be great, and to be full. I'll see y'all next week. Bye. Hey y'all, thanks so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you got some amazing nuggets to take home and start implementing into your life. And if you're looking for the show notes and links, head on over to maryhyatt.com/show. And if you loved it, why not bring your girlfriends along this journey of becoming fully alive with you? Just give a quick share of this episode to your social channels and enjoy those debriefing convos with your besties. Thanks again, and I can't wait to connect with you next week.